faithfully convey value and interpret great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, the book I'll interpret for you is Big Country, Big City, with the subtitle Unified Development and Balance in Contemporary China. People living in big cities often complain about urban problems: traffic congestion, severe pollution, strained public resources, even having to queue a year in advance for decent public kindergartens. Some believe this is due to oversized populations, suggesting we restrict migration. But is that really true? Big Country, Big City presents a different view. It argues that solving urban woes requires not restrictions, but further growth of megacities like Beijing and Shanghai. Economic development demands continued migration. Author Lu Ming is a distinguished professor at Shanghai Jiao Tom University, visiting scholar at Fudan and Peking University, and former consultant for World Bank and Asian Development Bank. He's researched China's urbanization and labor issues for over 20 years, since earning his PhD, publishing extensively on the subject. Among his nearly 10 works, Big Country, Big City is his most accessible. Readers praise how this academic work remains highly approachable. So engaging, you can devour it enthusiastically even on the subway. Lu Ming uses economics to explain both the benefits of population concentration and real solutions to urban ailments. We'll explore three key questions from the book. First, why should large nations develop megacities? Second, are urban problems truly caused by overpopulation? Third, why should population mobility be unrestricted? Let's begin with the first question. Why develop megacities? The author contends that modern economies inevitably create megacities. This is fundamental to contemporary development patterns. Developed nations rely on industrial and service sectors. Both thrive through population concentration. Modern services, especially finance, consulting, and tech, particularly benefit from dense populations. So what advantages does population concentration bring? One word captures it: economies of scale. This means larger scales boost economic efficiency, and cities embody this principle most powerfully. The three major effects of economies of scale in cities are sharing, matching, and learning. Let's go through them one by one. The first effect is sharing, meaning sharing fixed investments. Producers have fixed investments, like infrastructure or development zone construction, which require large capital. The denser the population, the more businesses and people there are to share these fixed investments. From the consumer perspective, there's also sharing of fixed investments. For example, the higher the restaurant's customer traffic, the lower the cost per consumer for the investment. The author shares an example. He has a Taiwanese friend who studied traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture in Taipei, then came to Shanghai for training, stayed, and didn't return. Well, why not? He said, in Taipei, I treated 30 patients a day. In Shanghai, I treat 300. This shows that with more clients, the clinic's fixed investments are shared. The second effect is matching, referring to labor market matching. As an employer, whatever type of person you need to hire, you can find in big cities, but not in small cities because specialized talent is insufficient. As a worker, even if you studied a niche major, you're more likely to find a job matching your specialty in big cities. When companies in Wenzhou grow large, they often move to Shanghai because as they upgrade, they need more skilled and professional talents, like designers, which Wenzhou can't provide locally. The third effect is learning, meaning that after specialization, labor improves through learning effects. On one hand, it's accumulating skills and reflecting. On the other, it's learning from other highly skilled individuals to advance further. The author says that job hunting is tough for graduates in Beijing and Shanghai, but why do they still want to stay after graduation? Graduates aren't foolish. When choosing where to work, they consider lifetime benefits. After initial employment, Their starting salary might only be a few thousand yuan, but after working at an accounting firm for a year and changing jobs, income could double. This is a manifestation of the learning effect. Progress in the service industry is endless. Unlike agriculture or mining, where lifelong effort may not yield higher income in middle age than youth, but services can grow continuously. For example, a university professor teaching the same course for years gets better and may make it a classic. Why are the world's top actors, professors, doctors, consultants, and financiers often in big cities? Don't they know that big cities are crowded and housing is expensive? They all know, but they still come to big cities because of the sharing, matching, and learning effects, essentially the benefits of economies of scale in large cities. This isn't just the author's theoretical analysis, it's confirmed by international patterns. According to World Bank research, more developed countries have higher population concentration. In developed regions like the US, Canada, Japan, and Europe, populations are further concentrating in big cities. This is related to the increasing share of modern services in the industrial structure. Take the Tokyo metropolitan area, centered on Tokyo as an example. Its area is only 3.5% of Japan's land, but its population is 36 million. That is about one-third of Japan's population is concentrated in this small area. Currently, Japan's overall population is declining, but Tokyo and the metropolitan area's population are rising. You might think Tokyo is an exception because Japan has a small land area and very high population density, so talent flocks to the Tokyo area. But actually, in Norway, where population density is only 1/25 of Japan's, population is also clearly concentrated in big cities. The top 3 cities in Norway account for over 20% of the national population. Population flowcharts from 2005 to 2009 in Norway show that people are still further gathering in these cities. So, for areas with population outflow, does this mean they're abandoned and will develop worse? The author believes that population reduction actually increases the income of those who stay, helping to narrow the urban-rural gap. Actually, whether a place has population outflow or inflow is largely determined by geographical location. In the era of globalization, cities closer to coastlines, facilitating international trade, are more developed, and people flow to them, while inland areas far from ports become population outflow zones. Outflow areas aren't like inflow areas. The pillar industries in inflow areas are services and industry. Killer industries and outflow areas are often immovable assets, like agriculture, tourism, and mineral resources, which, unlike services and industry, cannot grow infinitely. The output of agriculture, tourism, and mineral resources is fixed and hard to exceed its upper limit. Under these circumstances, the author believes that the only way to increase local residents' income is to reduce the working population. It's like dividing a fixed cake. To give everyone a bigger piece, you have to reduce the number of people eating it. This isn't just the author's imagination. The U.S. has already implemented this model in agriculture. The Midwest U.S. is vast and sparsely populated, relying mainly on 3 resources: corn, Yellowstone Park, the Grand Canyon, and copper mines. Their core resources are land, natural scenery, and minerals, respectively. These resources can't be moved. For immovable resources, to make people in related industries richer, you can only reduce the number of people. For example, in the U.S. Midwest, a large farm is operated by very few people. With modern machinery, they manage the farmland, and the income is shared among these few. So, farmers in the U.S. aren't core, they're often called farm owners. Currently, 80% of the U.S. population is concentrated on just 4% of the land area. Some Midwestern states have only 500,000 or 600,000 people, but their per capita GDP is comparable to big cities. That's precisely the point. This embodies a key principle of regional economics, achieving balance through concentration. This balance isn't about even geographical distribution of population and economic activity. It's about minimizing disparities in per capita purchasing power, considering factors like prices and income. People living in different places have similar levels of affluence. That covers the first issue, the author explains. Large nations inevitably develop big cities, determined by the characteristics of industry and services. From international patterns, population is indeed concentrating in fewer cities. For areas with population outflow, reducing population can actually increase local per capita income. Now, let's move to the second question. Are urban problems caused by overpopulation? Traffic jams, long queues, smog, crime? People living in cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen endure these annoying urban ailments daily. People often complain that it's because big cities are too crowded, almost bursting at the seams. But is that really true? Like, from an international comparison, China's cities aren't crowded enough. Various studies show that China's urbanization level lags about 10% points behind countries at similar stages of development. According to the 2010 census data, China's urbanization rate was around 50%, meaning that in this populous nation, urbanization had just crossed the halfway mark. So, according to international experience, urbanization doesn't slow significantly until reaching 70%, meaning people will keep flocking to big cities. Take Shanghai as an example. 2018 statistics show Shanghai's permanent population was 24.24 million, China's largest city population, yet modest compared to other nations' biggest cities. The author modeled and compared the most populous cities across 142 countries. Shanghai's population, as a share of China's total, is nearly the lowest among all countries studied. So if China's big cities aren't overpopulated, where do the urban problems we experience come from? The author believes past miscalculations in population growth predictions led to inadequate public services, causing urban problems. Historically, Beijing and Shanghai have repeatedly vastly underestimated actual population growth in their planning. For instance, Shanghai's 1999 to 22 master plan projected just 18 million permanent residents by 2020. But in reality, by late 2014, Shanghai's permanent population had already exceeded 25 million. Beijing's 2,424 to 22 master plan aimed to cap population at 18 million by 2020. Yet the 2010 census showed permanent residents had already reached 19.61 million. Yet policymakers based urban planning and public service arrangements precisely on these projections, sometimes even just registered population figures. Thus, public services and infrastructure became insufficient in reality, creating urban problems. Solving urban problems requires not artificial population control, but improved urban planning and management. Let's break down urban problems into three typical phenomena: pollution, crime, and traffic congestion. We'll address them sequentially, starting with pollution. Historically, environmental degradation stems not from population concentration, but from industrialization phases. As economies shift towards services, environmental conditions improve. For example, the 1940s to 50s saw environmental crises in developed nations, Los Angeles's photochemical smog and London's coal-induced Great Smog. But now the environments in Los Angeles and London are vastly different from before. Did they improve the environment because the population decreased? Not at all. The populations of these cities are still growing. The improvement in their environment is due to replacing polluting manufacturing with cleaner service industries. So pollution isn't caused by population concentration. On the contrary, population concentration can even reduce pollution. For example, in 2012, The Economist published data. Barcelona and Atlanta have similar populations, but Barcelona's area is only 1/26 of Atlanta's, and its per capita traffic emissions are much lower than Atlanta's. This means denser cities are more eco-friendly, largely thanks to subways. The denser the city, the more cost-effective it is to build subways. And a dense subway network reduces driving demand, easing urban pollution. Although Beijing and Shanghai are among the cities with the longest subway systems globally, from a development perspective, they still need more subways as their subway density lags behind major international cities. And in Shanghai, only about 25% of people use rail transit and public transport for travel, while in London, it's 65%, New York, 61%, and Tokyo, 80%. If one day in megacity centers, there's a subway within 500 meters of any location, and subway travel exceeds 80%, reducing car reliance, then urban pollution could be further resolved. Now, about crime. People often think that as urban populations grow, crime rates rise, which makes some sense. With higher population density, crime becomes easier. But at the same time, large cities have economies of scale in preventing and managing crime. For instance, with street cameras, for the same population size, higher density means each camera covers more people, making cameras more effective for crime control. This can be referenced to Latin America's experience. Recent research found three main factors affecting crime rates in Latin American countries: inequality, police presence, and incarceration rates. I'm not us. In other words, crime is a public governance issue, not about urban population size. Look at New York if you don't believe it. From 1990 to present, the population has kept growing, yet crime rates have dropped about 60%. Originally, one reason for New York's high crime rate was intense racial conflict, but as racial integration improved, crime rates declined. Finally, regarding traffic jams, besides the underdeveloped subway network we mentioned earlier, there are also issues with urban road planning and resource distribution under policy guidance. Intuitively, many think wide roads ease congestion, but in megacities, dense networks of small streets work better. They divert traffic like capillaries, foster street commerce, increase convenience, and reduce driving needs. For example, the author studied Shanghai's Tianzifang and Lianyang communities, similar housing prices located in Puqi and Pudong, respectively. Tianzifang has dense, small streets with many shops, so residents rely more on walking and subways, while Lianyang residents heavily depend on cars. Additionally, traffic stems from uneven urban resource allocation, a reflection of social systems. For instance, in Beijing during school breaks, total population doesn't decrease, but traffic improves significantly. This happens because top schools cluster in central districts due to policy and funding, forcing suburban parents to drive 10 kilometers daily for school drop-offs, creating severe convergence congestion. Thus, solving urban problems requires better planning and management, change industrial structures for pollution, promote social harmony for crime, develop subway systems for congestion, not by restricting population. While this might hide urban problems, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, stifling economic growth and competitiveness. Take Detroit, America's fifth largest city in the 1950s, but after auto industry declined, population plummeted, leaving vacant houses, closed shops, culminating in 2013 bankruptcy. That covers the second question. China's urbanization rate isn't high yet, and current urban problems aren't caused by overpopulation. Their root lies in urban governance levels. With the last question, why should population flow freely? The author consistently advocates for free population movement throughout the book. Why? Because free population movement allows both individuals and the collective to make optimal choices, maximizing real income for individuals. Imagine if all barriers to population movement were lifted. Where would people go? They definitely go to places with higher incomes. As the old saying goes, people move towards better prospects. When would they stop? When the real income from leaving or staying is about the same, real income means personal income adjusted for price differences. For example, a graduate might stay in Shanghai because wages are higher there than elsewhere. At what point would they not stay? When they feel that the real income adjusted for price differences in their hometown in the central western region is similar to Shanghai's, they won't stay. This effect, it also explains why free population movement won't lead to all 1.3 billion people crowding into Beijing and Shanghai. Because when choosing a city, individuals seek an equilibrium between benefits and drawbacks. Living in big cities offers more job opportunities, higher wages, richer lifestyles, but also means high housing prices, expensive rents, long commutes, and costly goods. Downsides: everyone weighs gains and losses. They leave when costs exceed benefits. Under this effect, free population movement allows everyone to find their highest real income, a personal right. For the nation, free population movement can narrow the urban-rural income gap and optimize resource allocation. Currently, China's urban-rural income gap is over threefold. The wealthiest Jing-Jin-ji region and Guizhou province have a per capita GDP difference of fourfold. As mentioned earlier, if population movement is free, only when the real income gap between urban, rural, and regional areas narrows to zero will population sizes stabilize relatively. Only then is true balance achieved between urban, rural, and regional areas, presenting a scene like developed nations. Moreover, this not only narrows income disparities, but also boosts overall income. Regionally, service-oriented megacities with growing populations enable finer division of labor and stronger economic development. As for population outflow areas, fewer people sharing the same resources means higher per capita income. A Bulgarian once discussed his homeland with the author. This Bulgarian said that after EU enlargement, many Bulgarians migrated to wealthier European countries, causing some local manufacturing to shrink. When asked about negative impacts, he replied, "Not really. Those who stayed increasingly turned to tourism, and life improved. For a country, uniform population distribution across territory isn't optimal. Based on regional comparative advantages, places needing more people should have them, while others need fewer. This achieves optimal resource allocation. Free population movement allows cities to develop differentiated specialization systems. Some regions manufacture cars, others focus on finance, tourism, or large-scale farming. This division of labor maximizes resource allocation through economic cooperation." The author states that after 30-plus years of rapid growth, China's demographic dividend has essentially ended. If China maintains medium to high growth for another 20 years, it could soon become the world's largest economy. But where will this growth momentum come from? The author believes it comes from the economic potential unleashed by free population movement. So what currently prevents free population movement? On one hand, exclusionary attitudes in big cities. On the other, unequal public policies. It must be clear, for megacities, migrants aren't burdens, but assets. Why do we say that? Among urban migrants, a significant portion are rural migrant workers. 2014 statistics show China had 270 million migrant workers. Did they flood into Beijing, Shanghai, or Guangzhou voluntarily? Of course not. Urban demand created this group. Services divide into two types: producer services, where high-skilled workers concentrate: finance, trade, consulting; and consumer services, where lower-skilled workers gather. dining, housekeeping, beauty salons. The higher the skill level, the greater the demand for lower skilled workers. For instance, a working mom needs a nanny at home while she's at the office, convenient takeout for the kids, and beauticians or masseuses for herself. A U.S. study found that one job in high tech industries like IT or bioengineering can create five other jobs. Two of these are relatively high end services, like doctors or lawyers, and three are consumer services, such as sales clerks or cashiers. In other words, the ratio of high skilled to low skilled labor is roughly 1 to 1. Some people support eliminating low end industries and restricting migrant populations. But imagine what would happen if we reduce lower skilled labor. Simply put, cutting labor supply raises service prices, and all urban residents bear this cost. And for example, the monthly pay for live in nannies in Shanghai has exceeded Hong Kong rates, making it unaffordable for many families. These families either squeeze working parents' time to care for kids or cut other spending, lowering their quality of life. Moreover, it's migrants who support the pension systems in big cities. The author once explained this to a somewhat exclusionary Shanghai taxi driver. Currently, of Shanghai's over 24 million permanent residents, 10 million lack Shanghai Hukou, making up 40% of the population. Without migrants' contributions, Shanghai's economy and pension security would have collapsed long ago. By late 2015, over 30% of Shanghai's registered population were elderly aged 60 or older. Because China's pension accounts are bookkeeping systems, young people's funds pay current retirees. Continued aging will cause Shanghai's pensions to run deficits, forcing reliance on large annual subsidies. With rising life expectancy, cities must expand to attract more young people so future elderly aren't left unsupported. Since migrants are vital to big cities, we must ensure equal public service policies. In 2014, China had over 60 million left behind children. Parent-child separation stems from exclusionary policies in big cities, especially in education and healthcare. They don't have local urban household registration. For children of migrant workers, it's hard to even get into public kindergartens. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Some say that migrant workers should urbanize locally and not come to big cities anymore. Those who say these things should ask themselves, why don't you go to small towns or the countryside? As a parent, if there was a policy that separated you from your child, how would you feel? The most basic principle of public policy in a country is to ensure that its citizens aren't discriminated against due to their identity during policy implementation. This relates to how civilized and modern this country truly is. If discrimination in policies isn't eliminated, what will happen? The author mentioned a term called the tunnel effect. For example, you're driving home stuck in a cross river tunnel, and when you see the cars ahead start moving, you'll be happy because you feel hope is coming. If there are two lanes and the cars in the one beside you move forward while yours doesn't, are you happy or not? It depends on whether you can change lanes. If you can change lanes, you'll be happy because you also gain hope to move. But if you find you can't change lanes, you'll be upset. Why should only the cars in the other lane get to go? Oof. This principle means that income gaps between different groups are normal. But if this gap comes from unchangeable identities, and people with disadvantaged identities lose at the start with no chance to advance, their despair will harm both themselves and society. For urban residents with privileged identities, it's like driving in the lane that can move. At first, you're happy, but if the people who can't change lanes get too angry and throw trash or spit at you, can you still be happy? Data from the National Bureau of Statistics in 2008 shows that the proportions of migrant workers with employer contributions to pension insurance, medical insurance, work injury insurance, and unemployment insurance are 6%, 10%, 21%, and 1.8% respectively. Social Security coverage for migrant workers remains low. Most don't participate in social insurance, leading to a lack of security. A study by the author shows that, compared to registered residents, non-registered residents are relatively less happy within cities. They have lower trust in the government, society, and community residents. Only when migrant workers can settle down will they form stable expectations, willingly receive skills training for long-term work. This is how China transforms from a populous nation to a human capital powerhouse. With security, migrant workers will dare to consume, enjoy richer lives, and further unlock urban potential. The author fully understands that abruptly lifting population restrictions overnight could cause unbearable social conflicts. But this doesn't justify restrictive policies. This is the third point. Free movement allows optimal allocation for individuals and the nation. We must eliminate exclusionary mindsets and provide equal public services through policy. That concludes the main content of this book. In essence, the author's core view is, in service-driven nations, people will flood into cities until costs and benefits balance. Unrestricted population movement maximizes societal resource efficiency. China's urbanization remains low. We should end policy discrimination and dismantle barriers to free movement. Urban problems people fear can be resolved through improved governance. Some tell the author he's too idealistic. He agrees but believes ideals matter not for immediate realization, but for guiding socioeconomic direction. In globalization, national competition centers on metropolitan clusters anchored by megacities. Abundant working populations are the source of urban vitality. All right, that concludes our interpretation of Big Country, Big City. Reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.